Well, normally a discount war would be a cause for celebration among the masses, but the milk price war has led to ferocious recriminations and a Senate inquiry. While consumers are happily lapping up cheap milk and Coles is purring at all the attention, everyone else in the supply chain has their backs up. Neil Woolrich reports.
A couple of years ago we had our milk price slashed mid-season, which hadn't happened for 30 or 40 years, and that was pretty hard to take.
Mick Hughes comes from a dairy farming family. He says times have been tough enough with a decade of drought followed by recent flooding rains. Now the industry faces another challenge as the major supermarkets slash prices on their plain label milk by up to a third.
I can't see that the industry can force the supermarkets to pay more. We just get told what we're paid, and that's what happens for the year. Like, we get told a flat rate and that's it.
Mick Hughes's milk is mostly destined for the export market, so he's largely unaffected by domestic pricing. Still, he's keenly watching the Federal Parliament's milk pricing inquiry, which opened this week.
I would hope there'd be something come out, but a little sceptical that there'll be anything come out of it.
We've endeavoured to be as fair and reasonable in the contract positioning that we put in place as we could to protect the industry, both the processors and indeed the dairy farmers. But what we do firmly believe is that ultimately the consumer shouldn't have to pay for the processors' profit margins.
Coles supermarkets fired the first shots in the milk wars on Australia Day when it started selling plain label milk for $1 a litre.
What we're trying to do is lower prices overall. I think what needs to be remembered here is that it was only 2.5 years ago that there was a Competition Commission inquiry into why grocery prices were too high.
We've got consumers benefiting from this. We will have more milk sales because of this, and we will have farmers producing more milk, which means higher prices for farmers.
While Coles says it wants a sustainable dairy industry, others are not convinced. At this week's first sittings of the Federal Parliamentary Inquiry into milk pricing, a host of critics lined up to slam the retail giant.
I have to admit, it does get up my nose that every day I figure out I'm actually subsidising Fonterra to sell house brand milk to Coles.
A value chain of $1 per litre would not appear sufficient to deliver an adequate return to all stakeholders involved in the production and distribution of a litre of milk.
And we're prepared to put on record that National Foods anticipated that it would deliver a profit margin of less than 2% this year, and this is before the recent spate of discounting.
Indeed, firms like National Foods are likely to be the biggest losers from price discounting as consumers switch away from food processors' profitable branded milk.
We're going to see more rationalisation in the processor industry going forward. We're going to see their margins cut. We're probably going to see them being forced to make significant investments in cost-saving technology. We're going to have a leaner processor sector.
When we look at the key processors and you look at their EBIT margins, they're 5%, 6% and 7% respectively. You know, Coles is making 4 cents in the dollar. Actually, our margins are lower than theirs are. So I think there are opportunities for us to still provide a great price for the consumer and for the processors to participate in that as well.
Coles has maintained its discounting won't affect farmgate prices, although it doesn't contract directly with farmers. But the Senate committee heard this week that some producers are already receiving less because consumers are buying more plain label milk. However, former ACCC Commissioner Stephen King says dairy farmers will eventually have to be paid more as milk consumption rises.
Dairy farmers will find that they're being enticed to produce more milk. How do you entice somebody to produce more? You've got to be paying them more.
If the milk price war does drag on, farmers here in Victoria at least have a plan B. They can export their produce and be assured of being paid the international milk price. But elsewhere in Australia, others don't have the same option. And it's those dairy farmers most at risk of being squeezed out of the industry.
So in states like Queensland, where 95% of our milk goes into the domestic market and we don't have other alternatives, in terms of markets, we're really left in a really difficult situation.
Adrian Peake says $400 million has been stripped out of milk sales over the past decade because of the switch by consumers towards more plain label milk. And he expects that trend will only gather momentum if the plain label discounting continues.
Those producers at that level in the value chain need longer-term security in terms of their price formats.
What you have to remember here is that actually the price has come down by about 4.5 cents a litre. You know, that's not going to destroy the dairy industry.
There's farmers that from drought be still carrying debt, and from lower milk prices possibly will be still carrying a huge amount of debt, and some that'll be affected with flood as well, and they'd have costs incurred in that. So they'll need a higher price to get through.
While Coles can't say how long the discounting will go on, it seems the dairy industry is about to undergo another shift, perhaps as significant in its impact as the deregulation reforms that happened a decade ago.